Dale's way behind me.
Good, great.
I didn't better than what to do.
Morning.
Yeah.
Sweatshirt.
Excuse me?
It's not a sweatshirt, I'm not ready for that yet. I am. I'm really not. I'd rather be warm.
He likes to be warm. I know.
Nigel trying to get you some.
They has,
Oh.
fine.
For what? For the council?
You gonna be here every Tuesday?
Yeah.
That's all.
Jeff? There he is, the mountain climber. Hi. Alright, it's 8 o'clock. Let's convene the Thursday, October 2nd Finance and Admin Committee meeting. Roll call.
Keith Dirk,
Here.
Tom Hole will be absent, John Gallen,
Here.
Steve Brenner,
Here.
and Greg Fortner. I did not hear anything from them.
Okay. Are there any public comment in relation to the Finance and Admin Committee? No? Okay, hearing none. Phyllis, let's start with the cash update.
All right, at the end of September, cash and investments totaled $11,785,000. So it's an increase since the end of August of $98,000. Although this time of year you typically see decreases, there were two unusual receipts in the month of September. In the beginning of the month, a portion of the DCD reimbursement for the borrower's applications were received. Of the 517 that was pending, 486,000 was received on September 1st. Then at the end of the month, the borough received its municipal pension system state aid in the amount of 383,000. Those two receipts together totaled 870,000 and caused what would have been a decrease to be the increase you see of $98,000. Pending activity at the end of September is accumulation of borrowers' applications that have not been reimbursed in the amount of 134,000. That would bring our total cash to 11,919,000. Interest rates remain unchanged with no rebound in sight. So funds that are not used for operations are in the VIST account. It formerly was known as the ICS account or the sweep account, now the intra-fi network deposits. I'm sorry, that just does roll off my tongue like it. That's it for cash. Any questions on our cash or investment position?
Hearing none, moving forward.
Looking at fund balances at the end of September. For the month of September, revenues did exceed expenses by $748,000 for the same reasons as the cash balance increased, bringing the year-to-date total to $3,366,000. When added to the beginning of the year fund balance, the overall fund balance is $12,865,000. Of that amount, $2,121,000 is reserved for future commitments. With the same pending activity from DCED reimbursement of $134,000, the unreserved fund balance with pending activity totals $10,878,000. Already included in that total are accounts receivable that were generated during the month of September. The general fund balances are high because they include the curbing invoices that went out. They were $142,000. The utility balances are likewise high because the third quarter utility billings were mailed right at the end of September. If we go on to look at what is remaining in the reserve accounts. At the end of August, total reserves were $1,341,000. Reserves remain for the Borough Hall renovations, for the sewer improvements from 2020, for future maintenance of the bike route, and for purchase of cameras for the police department, both body and car. Also, the funds received from the American Recovery Plan of $556,000 remain in reserves. During the month of September, an additional month was added to our MS4 reserve, bringing the total to $300,000. Jim did attend a Wyomissing Creek Coalition meeting earlier in the month, or earlier in September, and he learned that there are 2 projects that are planned for 2022, the amount of $250,000. The borough's share of that $250,000 is 20% or $50,000. So of the 300 reserve, we can plan on an expenditure of $50,000 in the 2022 budget. Also during the month of September, additional payment was made to McCarthy on the plan for the Public Works facility. That brings that project to approximately 97% complete. Also during the month of September, as approved by council, projects that were identified as not occurring in 2021 that had been included in the budget have been deferred to 2022. Those projects include the multimodal drainage projects totaling $530,000, the pedestrian bridge totaling $250,000. The repairs on the bridge have been removed from the unbudgeted safety items reserve, and the library air conditioning system in the amount of $30,000. So $810 was added to the reserve for projects that were originally budgeted during 2021 but will not occur to 2022. So that brings the overall reserve for future projects to $2,121,000.
Excuse me, I forget. Michelle, the multimodal, is that one project or is that a couple different ones?
It's actually the pedestrian bridge and then the Cambridge culvert. We took Paper Mill and Berkshire stormwater improvements off because they wanted us to own the retention basin and there's no sinkholes.
So the pedestrian bridge isn't in the multimodal, it's in,
It is, but our total between the $633,000 we're getting from PennDOT plus our required 30% match totals those 2.
If they were just budgeted on separate lines, the pedestrian bridge is considered part of the park system,
I couldn't remember.
and
if it was part of
the
it.
culvert is considered part of the storm route, so they were different budget lines. We go on to look at September results compared to prior periods. For the month of September, revenues total $2,604,000, bringing year-to-date revenues to $18,592,000, or 92% of what had been budgeted for the year. If we exclude the funds from the American Recovery Plan of $556,000, our revenues total $18,035,000, or 89% of what had been budgeted. For expenditures in the month of September, expenditures totaled $1,855,000, bringing the year-to-date total to $15,226,000, or 70% of what had originally been budgeted. So that the year-to-date results. For the month of September, revenues exceeded expenditures by $748, roughly those 2 receipts that were discussed with the cash summary, bringing the year-to-date total to $3,366,000. A number of transactions in September of note. The DCD reimbursement, as I said, was $486,000. The pension system state aid was received in the amount of $383,000. That revenue was recognized in the month that it was received, September. Payment has not yet been made. That will be due within 30 days of receipt. So that will be an October disbursement pending today's discussion. Also received in September was the 2021 Volunteer Fire Relief Association allocation in the amount of $52,000. That amount was received and has already been remitted to the Relief Association. There's a 30-day turnaround on that, and there's no question as to allocation. The full amount is remitted. Also occurring in September was the payment of the third quarter MMO contributions that were approved at the last meeting. Borrowers application number 10 was made in the amount of $104,000. The first application on the 2021 street projects was paid to the H&K Group in the amount of $136,000. The curbing invoices that relate to the work on Hill Avenue were sent in the amount of $142,000. Also, in that street project application were 4 ADA ramps, 2 of which were located in West Reading. West Reading has been billed for those ramps and have reimbursed the borough already in the amount of $17,000. A refund was made of 2020 real estate taxes to the owners of the Berkshire Mall. You may recall that assessment was decreased in 2020 from 28 million to approximately 14 million, cutting the amount of tax they had paid in half. The borough received notice of the county refund in July, and the 63,000 refund is what the borough processed during the month of September to return. We had only budgeted 7,000, so that was an unusual transaction. The dump truck was delivered. We previously paid for the chassis. In September, we paid for the body in the amount of $48,000. Also, the annual payment or contribution was made to Western Berks Ambulance Association, the amount of $25,000. Lots of unusual activity in the month of September. Any questions? We go on to look at our major revenue categories. The tax collector reports collections in the amount of just $2,900. That's typical of this time of year. We are in the penalty period, and at this time, most people who have not paid will wait till December to pay because it's the same 10% penalty. Most people with the incentive to pay will pay before, obviously, they are turned over to the county in January. That brings our total real estate tax collections gross to $4,402,000, or about 96%, leaving 4% uncollected. There is 167 bills not collected, and delinquent notices have been sent to those residents, so that's generating a lot of activity. So I have estimated to receive before the end of the year approximately half of that amount. So with a full amount of $2,900 received by the borough during the month of September, added to that would be the penalties related to those payments. So the total real estate tax collections during the month of September was just $3,000, bringing the year-to-date total to $4,429,000. So with the remaining revenue accounts, you'll notice the blue column, I've added a projection as to where I think we'll end the year in each of the relevant categories, with net real estate taxes totaling $4,523,000. We had budgeted $4,474,000. The variances you see in the current tax is a result of reassessments that occurred in 2020. Delinquent taxes from the county, the receipts there have been erratic. I did not receive any during the month of September. The collections from August were actually just received this week in October. So with 51,000 collected year to date, I've estimated to end the year at 61,000. The interim taxes of just 2,500 is all we'll receive during the current year. 2020 was quite unusual in that there was a number of change orders associated with the economic development, which were billed and collected during 2020. The county has informed us that they are having difficulties with their own software system, and that there will be no additional bills issued during 2021. So the changes that have occurred during 2021 will not be billed until January of 2022. So what we have at 2,500 is all we'll get for the current year. Penalties are starting to be collected. Year to date would be 6,200. Through the end of the year, I estimate 14,000. The discounts that have been granted is all that will, because everything has been collected in the discount period and there's no additional interims out there to be collected. Anything that had not been collected has been turned over to the county for collection. The county did provide an updated assessment. It's dated in August. They didn't give a specific date, but the August abstract shows an increase in District 96, which is primarily the residential portion of the borough, of $275,000. District 96A, which is Berkshire Heights, shows an increase of over $7 million. That will be favorable to us for 2022 when those bills are printed, but the changes that occurred during 21, as I said, will not be billed until January 2022. So that's lost revenue for the current year, but additional revenue for next year.
That bottom lower right.
That would be the tax associated with the $7 million increase at the current tax rate. We look at other local taxes for the month of September, totaled $572,000, bringing the year-to-date total to $4,757,000. Again, I've added projections for the end of the year, bringing our total local taxes to approximately 970 more than budgeted. We're at the end of the third quarter, so I do have details on each of these items. We look at real estate transfer tax. The usual monthly transfer tax averages $20,000 to $30,000. The months where it's higher is because there's been commercial properties that have settled. During the month of September, the $73,000 that was received from the county included the sale of, or the settlement of 1170 Berkshire Boulevard. So with year-to-date collections of $826,000, I'm estimating that we will end the year at $900,000. That would be with typical residential activity. If any commercial property settled during that time, that would be in addition to the $900,000. That would bring us in an even $500,000 more than the $400,000 that had been budgeted because of the commercial properties that are highlighted. We looked at earned income tax. The month of September included the large quarterly distribution, which brought the year-to-date collections to $2,403,000, or $296 more than we were at this time last year. We have already received the October payment of the September collections, so we have actually 10 months of data to budget with. That will bring the year-to-date total to $2,500,000. Of the budget of $2,600,000, I estimate that we will end the year $475,000 higher than budgeted. Looking at mercantile tax, we are in a period where we've already passed the due date, so the only thing being collected are delinquent taxpayers. Pretty much across the board at all the years you're viewing. At this point, we are in the high 90s as far as percentage of collections. Very little is anticipated between now and the end of the year. I project Wilson will fall short of the budget. Wyomissing has already exceeded the budget. So of the total $1,125,000 that has been budgeted, I'm projecting that we will end the year with $1,120,000, just $5,000 short of what had been budgeted. And finally, local services tax, which has been a concern. We have actually caught up with the distribution that was received in September. Year-to-date collections were $426,000, just $2,000 short of comparison to last year. We, along with the EIT, we have already received October's distribution for September collections, the amount of $5,000. So we are really pretty much even with where we were last year. I project that we will end the year pretty much even with budget. It is very reasonable to expect that difference at $142,000 in the remaining months. December will be the determining factor, which will be after, of course, we have budgeted for the year. Any question on any of the major revenue categories? I have a summary of all those variances. To look at capital projects, the 4th Street extension is complete. With application number 10, council approved that at its September meeting and payment was made shortly after. That payment in the amount of $104,000 is pending reimbursement. Final application number 11 brings the project to completion with no retainage in previous payments. There is a balance of $91,944. That amount was approved approved by the Infrastructure Committee on September 27th and is pending council approval next week on the 12th. On the 21 Street projects, during the month of September, payment was made on application number 1 in the amount of $136,000. Application number 2 was received, bringing the project to 93% complete and a reduction in retainage to just 5%. So with prior payments, there is a balance due of $196,000. Infrastructure Committee approved that payment application at its September meeting and is pending council approval next week. The sidewalk project has begun with about 1/3 completed this time. With a 10% retainage, there is a payment due of $23,000 that was approved by the Infrastructure Committee in September, is pending council approval next week. The third and final application has been received from Mr. Rehab for the 2020 sewer work. Brings the project to a total of $117,000, which was $42,000 under budget. With no retainage and prior payments, there is a final payment due of $25,853 that was approved by the Infrastructure Committee on September 27th and is pending council approval next week. The first application has been received on the 2021 sewer work from Sewer Specialty Services. That project is approximately 47% complete with 10% retainage. There is a payment application amount of $97,445 due. Infrastructure Committee approved that on the 27th, and council approval is pending next week. So to sum up all the capital projects, during the months of September, the small dump truck was paid for in the amount of $48,000. Application number 10 was paid for borrowers in the amount of $104,000. Application was made and paid on the first application of street work, 2021. That was reduced by the amount that has been reimbursed by West Reading. And there was engineering fees paid to McCarthy in relation to the 4th Street wrap-up. There was an additional payment made on the sewer work that was not part of the contract, the amount of $7,200. I believe that work was done in the Dolphin Avenue vicinity. That brings total capital expenditures during the month of September to $280,000. Year-to-date to $2,421,000, or about 54 of what had been budgeted. You'll see highlighted those items that have been identified as being deferred until 2022. So with all the payment apps that we discussed, October payment apps for all the projects listed, 4th Street, 2021 street work, sidewalks, 2020 sewer, and 2021 sewer, payment applications that will be made in October, or a total of $435,000. That amount, in addition to the pension payment, will be large payments going out in October, so you can anticipate the cash decreasing for the month of October. Any questions on the capital projects?
So the remaining capital projects that we didn't move to next year, we anticipate that they're gonna be paid out this year?
Yes. With no retainage rolling over. So with everything we know about the large categories in revenue and all the payment applications that have been made, completed, or are anticipated to be completed before the end of the year, I've projected where we may end the year for 2021. My starting point was the budgeted revenues. What I've done to that amount is remove the categories that we have better amounts projected. So for net real estate taxes, other local taxes, I can anticipate what the grant revenue will be. We know with fair certainty what the Benetcon reimbursement will be, and we know what the curbing invoices that were sent out will be. Assuming all the other items net, there's a lot of positives, a lot of negatives. I estimate the projected revenue at the end of the year to be $20,777,000, or a positive variance of $507,000. Doing the same thing with the expenses. Expenses were budgeted at $21,745,000. I've removed the projects that are being deferred to 2022. I've replaced the estimates for the capital projects with the actual contracts or amounts that have been expended. I've added in expenditures that were unplanned for safety projects that were paid out of the Equus transfer tax. That would include the planning of the public works facility, the unanticipated tax refund paid to the Berkshire Mall owners, and the safety projects that have been completed. So at the beginning point of budgeted expenses of $21,745,000, at this time, with all the information that's currently available, I estimate that we will end the year with expenses of $21,189,000, or a positive variance of $555,000. Together with a positive variance of $507 in revenues, we have a swing of over $1 million. So where the original budget was a projected use of fund balance of $1,476,000, with those positive variances, we most likely will end closer to a $400,000 deficit.
So let's say again, what did you take out of revenues? Like the American Rescue Plan, is that in
That-
revenues or not?
No, the
So that's out
American
of there.
Rescue Plan is not in this equation.
What else is
To
out?
whatever extent that it's committed
Yes, sir.
to fortify fund balances for lost revenues, that would be in addition to this amount. Whatever amount we don't will be deferred and will not be a current year revenue. So this estimate that you're looking at does not include the American Rescue Plan funds.
But it does include like the $350,000 for the
It
Equus
does,
real estate
because
transfer.
that's part of the projected year-end balance
Right.
for other local taxes, yes.
But it's an unusually high revenue, unanticipated revenue.
It is unanticipated, but has been realized.
So what else would have been budgeted, would not budgeted, that would have been a large income revenue? Like, if the American Rescue Plan's out, but the Equus is in, is there anything else in the revenue that's an anomaly from year over year?
Well, we talked about the major revenue categories, and yes, there are unusual transactions in there, but that is cash that is in the fund balance and available for use.
But probably not anticipated in future years.
Correct.
That's what I was trying to understand.
Yes.
I'm trying to understand what the value, how much of this was a result of things that we're more than likely not gonna see in future years.
Well, that will be budget consideration for 2022, but it doesn't change the year-end result.
I understand,
Or the
I'm just
funds.
trying to understand what the offset is. That, I wanna understand if we were close to budget or not, if we wouldn't have gotten those unanticipated revenues. That's what I'm trying to
Okay,
understand.
I follow your question, and I don't have that number.
Okay.
Phyllis, in the top
Look at the expense.
major revenue items, the itemized
How much that we won't see.
things add up to 8 million, and we have 20 million in revenue.
My starting point was the budgeted revenue. I took out all the major categories that we've discussed the variances on, and presumed that the remaining items are gonna offset each other. So the remaining 300 lines are all the pluses are gonna offset all the minuses. I've already projected line by line all the revenues. And when I compare the result of that exercise to this, I was off about $4,000. So I feel confident
Just
that
showing, this is showing major variance.
this is showing major variances. So if I start with budgeted, take out the major items, remaining items are 8 million. I'm saying in my projection, that 8 million that remains is going to be pretty much equal to what was budgeted. So the projected large categories plus the remainder of 8 total 20. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right, as additional information becomes available, I'll continue to update the projections and we'll go from there. All right. Any questions on September results? We're using the September results to project where we may be for the end of the year.
Thank you. next thing we have to discuss is setting up, dates for the special budget meetings to be held before finance and admin next month. So, I'll break out our wallets, phones.
Are you telling me?
Well, it's in April.
Slip.
All right, so we're at
September,
October 7th. The next regularly scheduled meeting will be on Thursday, November 4th. I'm hoping to have all of next week to continue to finalize what I'm working on. So I'm looking at the week of the 18th or the 25th to hold special budget meetings. In looking at last year's schedule, we found that the first draft was presented very late in the month, actually October 27th, with special meetings held again on Tuesday, November 3rd, and then a final on Thursday, November 5th. So that was a pretty quick turnaround time. So if we could look to the week of the 18th or 25th for the special budget meetings.
Is everybody be okay with Thursday, the 21st at 8 a.m.?
Book it down.
Hmm?
Book it down. Yeah.
You good with that, Phyllis?
We have a draft one on Thursday, the 21st.
Yep.
I will try to get information out to you ahead of time for review.
Okay, and I assume we'll advertise that. Sorry. Next thing on the agenda. HRA Bank Account.
All right, I do have a little history here for the HRA account and how we got to this point. Prior to 2012, the borough administered a pet account that was for prescription, eye, and dental expenses that were incurred that were not covered by insurance. Employees submitted to the employer evidence of receipts for those expenses, and through accounts payable, we made reimbursement. With HIPAA concerns, we outsourced that process to a third-party administrator, and what we've experienced is difficulty both with the administration side and with the participant side with our current administrator. So after some research by Melissa, we found that Benicon, who is our healthcare administrator, also does administer health reimbursement accounts. So we, I believe the personnel committee approved that change. It will change the way we have budgeted, however. So since we made the conversion since 2015, the budget has three components. In January of each year, there were payments made to people who did not participate in the healthcare reimbursement plan. Those were pre-tax payments made in January. In December of calendar year, payment was made to the third-party administrator to fund the subsequent allowances, the subsequent year's allowances. So there was always a deferral of 1 year's funding, in that the TPA was funded in December, but the payments to non-participating members weren't made to January of the following year. With the change of administrators to Benicon, all participants in a healthcare plan participate in the HRA plan. So we are looking at full funding in the same year. We need to open a new account. Previously, funds were paid to the TPA and they held those funds, and we added to them each year. With administration by Benicon, the borough will own the checking account, and we fund it either all at once or fund it as needed. So I'm looking for direction as to what funds to use to open the account. The funds that are currently held by WageWorks, our current TPA, will not be available to most likely February 2022. They'll administer through the end of the calendar year. They'll have a 1 month rollout period to cover expenses that were incurred during the current calendar year. Will be settled and most likely will be returned to the borough in 2022. That will be a revenue that we can anticipate. It is a refund of the prior year expense. But we need to fund the accounts so that employees can use it during So to open up a new account, and I'm recommending a separate account from our current account, so we don't commingle HRA administration with borough operations. We need to fund an account. We can partially fund it, or we can fully fund it. If we fully fund it, because we're accelerating all the payments into the current year, we will go over budget by approximately $6,000. My estimate of the full funding is based on 58 full-time employees. There are nine employees who do not participate in our health care plan, leaving 49 covered by the health plan, and therefore entitled to the HRA coverage. At 1,500 employee, the full funding is $73,500, added to the amount that has already been distributed in January of the current year for people who did not previously participate. As I said, the estimate for the total expense for the end of the year is $92,000, $6,000 in excess of budget. So I'm looking for guidance as to how much money to use to open the new account so that it is open and available for an employee to go to the doctor on January 2nd and start to process claims.
I would fund half of it at most. You're gonna find under HRA, the majority of their claims are gonna happen in the first half of the year, but even in January, February, by the time the claims get processed and it's, drag on that, and someone submits it, you're talking about 30 days, 45 days. So I think we could, without going over budget, even though we're technically not going over budget, but we are on paper, why don't we just fund half of that number and then sometime in the first quarter fund the other half and be done with it?
And then the approximate balance that is currently held by WageWorks is about $85,000.
Okay,
Those funds won't be received until,
hold on a second. So we're gonna get $85,000 back on a budgetary number of $73,500.
correct.
Okay.
So those are expenses that have been paid, that have been paid over the years,
And you think we'll get that reimbursement in February?
most likely.
Do you have any idea what our normal reimbursements would have been in January of the last 2 years or so? Do you have any idea?
No, because that was the purpose of the third-party administrator.
Sure.
We fully funded it, and then the employer had their hands off of it, so we weren't involved in any of the processing.
I anticipate HRA claims, if someone has something done that's applicable to funding for the HRA, it may happen, if it happened in the first week of January, they wouldn't get their explanation of benefits, their billing statements from the provider until the following week at the earliest. And then you have a 2
Actually,
period.
Steve, the card, or the program works with an HRA card. So you're at a provider, and the expense you're incurring is not covered by insurance. For example, if you're at the eye doctor and you're ordering glasses,
Okay.
you hand them that card on that date. So the cost of the eyeglasses is swiped right at that time. It's not waiting for any explanation of benefits. It's paying these items that are not covered by
If I go
insurance.
to a doctor's office and I have a $25 copay,
Yes.
my blood work may be applicable to the deductible, may not be applicable to the deductible. The doctor's office isn't gonna know how much to bill you at that point.
Right.
So
And-
you will then get a bill and then use your HRA card to pay for that bill.
You can, yes.
What you get to bill, not the explanation.
Yeah. I don't think we need to fund more than $10,000.
There's a lot of people that wait until January
Till
to
they
they
have
run
their
their
balance.
balances out and schedule dentist appointments, eye doctor appointments.
So you're talking about claims that incurred in December that
No.
they're getting back in January?
No, like I'm gonna go to the dentist, say January 10th, and oh, you need a crown, so that cost, if you participate in the dental insurance we offer, is still $300 or $400 out of pocket, I think. So I would be swiping my card right then and there, in addition to whatever my dental insurance is paying.
So, okay, so if we put in $20,000, just using a arbitrary number, if we put in $20,000 for January, we get $85,000 sometime in mid-February. We can't reimburse the budget from the previous year, that $20,000.
You can't? So the $85,000 has to go to this fund. You can't reimburse the $20,000 you took from the general fund and only put in $65,000.
That 85,000 is related to specific accumulations for individual employees. There are some police balances,
Are they allowed to accumulate more money than $1,500?
the police plan is, yes. The police balances can run into over $10,000 in one or two cases.
But it was borough funds that,
It is borough funds previously paid. They are related to specific individual employees. The only time that they would be returned to the borough in theory would be upon termination following a run-out period.
no, I guess what we're saying is can't the borough loan this fund $20,000 and then when the $85,000 comes back, decide how to fund it? And where to put the $85,000?
We can do all those things.
That doesn't really matter.
So we're doing the 85,000, we're gonna have 85,000 in there plus an additional 73.5.
We would have a large amount sitting there waiting for employees' claims until such time they use them or terminate and not use them during the run-out period.
What do we do with funds for employees who are not in the police union, who do not use their entire allotment of their HRA?
What we're going to do now, in keeping with the healthcare contract, is that if you have medical coverage, you get a card. That is no longer a choice to receive the
Understood.
one-time taxable payment. That's the proper way to do that. So there will be an accumulation of unused funds. The question is whether to fully fund the potential use, as has been past practice, or to better manage that, to try to match it to potential claims.
If I work in this building and I'm not in the police union and I have $1,500 of my HRA card and I use $1,300 of my HRA card in that calendar year, what happens to the $200?
It rolls over, it's a continuous accumulation.
Right, so we need to figure out then what the, of that $83,000, how much of that is police money that can roll over? And how much of that was just roll over from one year to the next that we didn't bother, that we just rolled into the plan, but they really have no, I couldn't in that example go get $200 more next year, I can't get $1,700.
No, yes, you can. Yes, you can do exactly that.
Well, then everybody's rolling over.
Everyone is now rolling over, yes. The foundation of the plan, when it was a pet account, had the police with no accumulation limit. Everyone else was capped. So the police started with larger accumulations, everyone else
Cap, what, I don't remember what the cap everybody else had, so.
was 2,000.
2,000. So there's still some number in there, Phyllis, that is gonna be in excess of what someone could potentially get reimbursed in a year. Take the police out.
Whatever your balance is your limit for reimbursement. I'm not following your question.
So if you just said that the maximum is $2,000.
That was when the employer was administering the pet account.
Right,
Since we transitioned to the TPA and the rules for the HRA, there is an unlimited accumulation for everybody. The police just happen to start with larger balances.
So the $85,000 that they are currently holding, we don't know what portion of that is attributed to rollovers as compared to unused balances for the year.
I'm sure.
You mean the unused balance for 2021?
Right.
No. We'd have to look at who had a zero balance at the end of 2020. And then deduct current year claims against the 2021 allowance.
All right, so $6,000, we paid the whole $73,500, the $6,000 would put it, we'd be over budget by $6,500, correct?
Correct. That's if we fully fund next year's plan,
Then you're gonna have $150,000 in the account.
sitting in that account.
I get it, person sitting doing what right now anyway?
Well, it doesn't matter, but it's still.
Well, right now it's not in our
funds that are
possession.
allocated that you can't get
Yeah.
back.
We'll earn 0.1% of interest on that, where we're not currently.
That was where I was going with that comment.
I guess you just need to know what your projection is, because you need to know what is allocated that isn't, what is the rollover amount? So if there's $10,000 worth of rollover account, you anticipate you need 73.5, so you should only be funding 83.5 for the year. That should be the full balance, that should be funding it for the full next year, is 83.5, if 10,000 of it is accumulated.
The full funding for next year is 73.5.
Understood, but you still need to fund whatever the rollover amount is.
But
She's
we'll-
saying the rollover amounts the whole 85,
We'll get that back in February.
Now, what portion of it is, if Michelle has $1,700
What portion is
coming to
the
her, she has $200 left this year, she's gonna roll over next year.
Mm-hmm.
We need to know what that amount of rollover is, because that's the fully funded amount for next year. So if Michelle
She could
and everybody else
potentially-
has $200, and
Or
there's
she could have
59,
potentially have
200, and there's
accumulated.
60 employees, there's $12,000. So the fully funded amount for next year is 85,000.
But she could have accumulated $200 a year for the last
That's what
10
I'm
years.
saying. So what's her rollover amount?
Melissa,
What that
Accumulated
number is for the
we
whole
contact
program.
And then that's what-
for
that's
the
what
you're
just
talking about,
ask
right?
What is
for,
that
like,
number?
without
Oh, no.
leaves,
Well, that's
like,
right.
can we just get a balance of all 50
Should be.
accounts?
Am I wrong?
We did that, that's 85,000.
So that is your,
That's what's rolling over into next year, if no one has any additional
so
funds.
you're safe figuring out.
Just look at that as a
27.75.
Yes, yeah.
It's just a matter of managing
That,
what we can.
see, that 86 is
The obligation.
everybody's accumulated balance, so if you roll that, I mean, as of now, if nobody used their HRA card again for the rest of this year, there's $86,000 in there, which is everybody's balance plus anything that should roll over.
Okay.
That's,
But we're not getting those funds until February.
got it. So we could be pre-funding an expense that accumulated for in the past years.
Correct. And we will recognize that revenue
That's $6,500.
in 2022 when it's returned to
Yeah,
us.
that's right.
But this.
Why don't we just refund the account less than $6,500, so we're still under budget? We'll pay the other $6,500 next year.
So we can open the account with an amount less than 73.5, just to keep it within the current year budget
Yep.
and fund the balance in
January 2nd,
2022.
yeah.
Okay. Can we do that?
Since, if you're considering Steve's recommendation, should you also have a reserve number for, the portion of the liability that you're not immediately depositing in that new account? It is a liability of the borough, even if we don't put all the money in the account at one time.
You mean what we anticipate getting back, reserve for what we anticipate getting back?
I mean, I guess, but with Steve's, the only thing you would reserve would be that small portion.
$6,500.
Sure.
I don't see that it needs to be necessary. Well, let's do this, my recommendation is do the 73.5 minus 65, so that'd be $67,000 if I did my math right.
So we can open the account with that amount. So it'll be
Second.
fully funded for 2022, and then when the funds are returned,
That
we
didn't work
can.
at first. All right, so we're gonna open an account, who are you opening it with, we're just
And
same place?
and you're right, so that when funding's necessary, I can do it by transfer rather than writing a check.
That makes sense. All right, so we have a recommendation to, I'll make a motion that we fund it $67,000 to check account for the use of the HRA. Greg seconded. Any questions? Or all those in favor? Opposed? Questions? Questions passed.
With that motion, do we need a resolution to authorize that account? Is that our typical
Yes.
practice? So I will prepare a resolution for council on that new account.
Thanks. Okay, moving on. Pension system aid allocation for 2021.
recap of the pension plan, when the last valuation occurred in January of 2019, the market was down. The assets were evaluated and the plans were only 79% funded, which left us with a distress score of 1, which was minimally distressed. The market quickly recovered, and by the end of 2019, the overall funding ratio was 95%, and their distress score returned to 0. Even better, at the end of 2020, where the overall funding ratio was over 105%. With a goal by resolution that was passed, our interest rate on our salary scale were to be adjusted. The interest rate down to 6.5, the salary scale down to 4%. So in July, the committee recommended and council approved reducing the interest rate to 7% and the salary scale to 4%, and the update to mortality table was approved at that same time. The result of the 1/1 valuation, having applied those changes, instead of being 105% funded, the actual ratio is now 93%, still with a distress score of 0. So with that in mind, we're looking to what to contribute for the remainder of 2021. The state aid was received on September 28th in the amount of $383,000. We are committed to remit that or contribute that to the plans within a 30-day window. When that amount is combined with the 3 quarterly contributions that have been made and added to the defined contributions that are made with each and every payroll, is a known number through the, actually today is a pay date. I've estimated what it will be through the remainder of the year. Total contributions for 2021 will be approximately $1,119,000. When that's compared to the MMO of $1,191,000, there is a balance that remains. What adds to the complication here is that the total contributions that are estimated for the fire department will exceed the MMO. We are permitted to use the overfunding in one plan to offset the liability in other plans. That has not been our past practice. We have always funded the plans with the state aid in the same ratio of the units that have been certified. Having checked with Ron Bittner at Girard Pension Services, he agrees that the overfunding in the fire plan should not be used to offset the liabilities of the police and the non-uniform plan. Keeping in mind that when you look at the funding ratios, the fire plan is the lowest funding at just 78%. So if we were to take the state aid and apply the unit value of $4,797 and some change to each of the units that were certified, the state aid would be allocated as shown in the first yellow column. So the first motion that is needed is for the contribution of the state aid to the pension plans.
So,
I'll second it. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
So after the state aid is made, there is a balance remaining for both the police plan and the non-uniform plan. In order to meet the MMO, I'm suggesting that we revise the 4th quarter contribution for the police plan to be $151,782. And I'm suggesting that the revised 4th quarter MMO for the non-uniform plan be $30,000, and that there'll be no additional contribution to the fire plan. So second separate motion is needed for the 4th quarter revised MMO. That contribution can wait to December, or we can make it at any time prior to that to take advantage of any market fluctuations.
And 181 is what we budgeted, right?
We budgeted the MMO, we budgeted 1,191,000. If we do all the contributions as presented, our total pension expense will be approximately 10,000 over budget.
Right, the balance including is, we would owe 171 right now, but you're suggesting 181.
I'm suggesting 181 because we have by past
We have all
practice
said.
and by recommendation, not use the overfunding of the fire
Right.
plan
Right.
to offset the liabilities of the police and the non-uniform plan.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor to pay, a second, to pay $181,782.58 for the fourth quarter. All those in favor?
Is
Any
there,
opposed?
sorry,
Done.
is there recommended timing on that contribution? It needs to be made obviously by the end of the calendar year.
Just like one in the calendar year.
Well, one, I don't
Whenever
know.
you normally do it.
Is it gonna be good before the end of the year or bad before the end of the year, right? That's the question.
Doesn't matter really.
Doesn't really matter. Got it in before the end of the year.
Yeah.
Right. Pay it by, how about we just pay it by the end of, we should pay it by the end of October? Get it in early?
I mean, October is gonna be a large outflux of cash between all the capital projects.
Say it again?
October already is gonna be heavy with cash disbursements with all the capital project applications,
What's your recommendation?
plus the state
So
aid.
you're looking to wait till the end of the year to submit it?
Yeah, I'd say not in October,
Okay.
but,
Then let's wait until the end of the year unless we change our mind in November.
okay. All right,
Perfect.
that's all I have for September results.
Well, I lost my agenda,
I
apologies.
have it here.
Can you go back to that last sheet, one before that? Is there, are we gonna be aiming for that target in 2022, the last column? A further reduction in the interest rate and,
Well, the next valuation isn't gonna occur till January of '23.
okay.
Actually do have the resolution available.
Did we have something in place that we're halfway reduce this with?
No, we had that at the last meeting. Voted to change it,
No.
or one of the meetings.
Here we go. Here is a resolution.
Yeah, right, sure.
This is a funding plan that was established in 2019. Just says over time.
So
Yeah,
6.5.
okay.
Yep.
We're pretty close.
We're close.
Those
And we
ones
could
are
have done
phenomenal.
we could have done the whole bite with this last valuation.
It's in great shape. And we haven't done any additional contributions for a couple of years.
We have not, it has been the recommendation of Gerard.
Yeah,
Because until we adjusted that interest rate, we were way overfunded and then we would jeopardize the receipt of our state aid.
I'd like to see another municipality in Berks County.
And those guys.
How will we have them?
90%.
Yeah.
Well, we were told by the administrators that we were kind of unique. Yeah. You know, a lot of other pension plans were really underfunded, very good.
Okay,
Thank you.
moving on.
Yeah, politics.
So we discussed the quarter four MMO revision and motion to approve. I guess we did that. So now we're on the auditor appointment. And there's a resolution for accounts. Do I have to read all that? There's a resolution of the Borough Council, Borough of Wyomissing, Price County, Pennsylvania, appointing Herb Binding Company as independent auditor of the Borough of Wyomissing. We need to make a motion to agree to that, or did the borough already do this?
Motion to recommend that resolution to council.
So I will make that recommendation, move this to council.
The fee is unchanged.
Second.
We have a
Question, just that you're satisfied with everything, you're getting everything you need from Herbine?
They are the
I
experts.
mean, there's been a lot of change in personnel over at that place, I just want to make sure that.
No, our contact has remained constant.
Acquiring.
Okay, so we have motion on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So we did A and B, right? All right, summer playground policy.
Steve, do you wanna take this one as a member of the rec board, or do you want me to cover it?
Go ahead, start with it, I'll fill in the gaps.
Okay. So, some of you may recall at the August council meeting, there was a motion on the table to adopt a policy limiting access to the playgrounds as a whole during the summer playground program. This had been a verbal policy of playground staff for quite some time. There were signs made up many years ago that, were posted around the playground area. That motion was tabled, kicked back to the rec board. We did discuss it with the rec board at this September meeting. One of the points that Dan and I made about the reason we were requesting a formal policy in writing is primarily due to safety and the background checks that we make all of our summer staff or anyone working with youth go through. The playground leaders have had challenges with people coming to the playground, sitting down at the table under the pavilion attempting to do an arts and crafts after they're being asked to leave. It's very hard when you are working with, that many kids, trying to keep them all in one area and monitor who's around them to stop someone from just walking in. And, again, going back to the hoops we jump through to get these FBI clearances, the background checks, to keep them updated in the system and make sure, every 5 years as they're expiring, they're updated to, just allow random people to walk into that playground group, kind of throws what we're trying to achieve out the window. So what we're asking for is just something in writing that could be an amendment to the Parks and Recreation chapter of the borough code that puts that policy in writing so the police can actually enforce it if there's an issue. I don't think, it's not gonna be an immediate, somebody shows up, hey, we're calling the cops, get off the playground. There's still gonna be verbal interaction back and forth with the person, asking them to leave the playground area during playground hours. I know there was some discussion at the August council meeting about, people coming in from out of town and wanting to use the playground. We've also discussed at the last rec board meeting about setting up maybe like an out of town 1 week playground pass, so you're not paying the full registration fee for the entire summer, but if you have guests coming from out of town and want them to be able to participate in that playground program, you can purchase a discounted rate for a 1 week pass.
I think that's a great idea.
Give that to Steve, credit that to Steve.
The reality of what we're facing here is you have kids swinging on the swings, and we have someone bringing their kids, maybe it's a babysitter bringing the kids that they're babysitting that aren't with the playground. I was, quite frankly, just like hoping in this world that you can sit back and say, hey, they're being harmless, let's let them go. But the rec board brought up a good point that we have to do background checks on everybody that's at the playground. We can't do a background check on that person swinging out of the kid on the swing. We don't let people into the pool, it's fenced in, I get it, but we don't let people in the pool who aren't members of the pool. So what they're recommending is you're basically closing the playgrounds during the time of the playground. I had a hard time arguing when they started brought up all the safety points, so I had a hard time arguing it. So that's what we came up with. If this won't happen to me. If someone's grandchildren, that can't happen to me for a while. If someone's grandchildren come to visit grandma or grandpa, for example, for a week, maybe we can charge a fee, which we'll talk about at some other point, of $50, $35, and then they can be a member of the playground for a week. We can only do it for 1 week a year per game. So you can't have members of the borough saying, hey, I'm only gonna be here, I wanna pay $35 a week for this week, these number of weeks. It's so cheap in the first place that it wouldn't make sense to do that, but we're talking about that one-time fee. So if Keith's grandkids come in and stay with Keith for a week, he certainly wants to get his grandkids to the playground for a couple hours, he'll pay the $35.
No?
Where's your bed?
So what we're recommending, what the rec board is recommending is basically the playground will be closed during playground to anybody outside of the playground sort of dome of things to keep it a little bit safer. And I had a hard time arguing that one. So that's, the compromise we made was, you can sign up for a week at a time, 1 week maximum.
I completely understand the safety issues, but what do you do with the parents of the 2 and 3-year-old kids who aren't eligible for the playground because they're too young, but they want to take their kid out, and that's the entire morning when it's, maybe a better time to go, and then they see a day in the afternoon, they're not allowed to take their kids. Or in the evening when it's a little cooler, I mean, like, that's a concern, I think some residents are gonna have some concerns with that, or maybe you don't wanna sign the kid up for playground because you know they can't be there for spending that much, but you still have a hot day, do you wanna? I understand the safety concerns, but is there any way we can come up with some sort of system where people can register, like, so that we know who's there, I mean, I know it.
We can try, I guess my only concern with that is no matter how much you advertise that, there's always gonna be the person that has no idea it exists and shows up.
That was my first
But I
recommendation,
mean,
was to register
if
ahead of
I
time.
had a 2 and a 3-year-old at home and I wanted, I wouldn't be so thrilled about it.
I mean, I think we could attempt to do that and then just communicate to the playground leaders. If someone, like, here's a list of everybody who said they had to come to the playground today, outside of the playground program, like, that called Dan and said, hey, I'm not a member of the playground, but I wanna take my 2-year-old down there at 10:30 Monday morning. Outside of that, if people show up, you need to instruct them to call Borough Hall and talk to Dan, and, just somehow
I mean,
get at
can
it.
it say something like without prior permission, or,
Yeah.
Something so that at least we're not, right, we have an option maybe for those residents who.
I think we're gonna have to, maybe Dan, Melissa, and I sit down and talk about some language and some wording for, signage that would go along with that, information on the website, the rec guide. But we could attempt to accommodate that as much as possible.
As a grandparent of a child just that age, trips to the playground are more spontaneous than that. You're not planning ahead, that, on Tuesday, I think I'll go to the playground at 10 o'clock. You're hoping that the child's waking up in a good mood and has eaten. And a toddler's schedule is, I think, a little more spontaneous than.
Well, I guess I was anticipating not registering for that day, but registering like these are
In
these
general.
are, right, registering that, this, I may be coming to the playground for the summer, or if there's some way we can at least keep track of those people. I understand we're still not gonna get background checks and all of that, or even a way to say you can only be in this part of the playground.
Well, and
Like when the other, where the playground program, they're just playing kickball and no one's really,
Yeah, near
doing
them.
whatever, then there's no reason they can't be on the swings, or, like.
A lot of the problems we seem to have this year were parents coming or babysitters and physically inserting themselves into the play. Like, oh, this is like a fun craft, I wanna join.
You have to be a playground participant,
Yes.
registered playground participant to participate in those activities.
But then there's also.
The issue is how do you keep some people segregated from the.
And the bathrooms, shared bathrooms was another concern that came up at the rec board meeting. If you have someone there using the swings that's nowhere near where the playground activities are taking place, but that person goes into the bathroom at the same time the child does, and then you have that commingling, and so I mean, again, I think Dan, Melissa, and I can sit down and come up with some parameters for that, but we do need to put some thought into how we can accommodate both if we're not entirely shutting it down.
It's good news that we have a little bit of time to work with.
Yeah, thank God.
Okay.
This is at finance, because we're talking about charging a fee.
No, this is the admin section, finance and
John, I was
administration.
thinking the same
Yeah, I was,
thing.
Chris
One was thinking
reminded
too.
me that it was also in
It's
it.
finance and administration.
There we go.
All right.
That's some part of
We'll
it.
keep working on the summer playground policy, but that's sort of the background of where the rec board is. Moving on, is there any old business? Any new business? Anybody want to make a recommendation to adjourn?
Second.
So moved.
Adjourn.
Like a separate area? No, the back.